Richard Gladwell here from Sail World, here with Will Oxley, who's the navigator of Team Alvimedica. Well, when we came into saw the finish of the race, it was a very close race, and particularly those last few days. And Ian Walker made the comment that he felt they could have offloaded the boats at Cape Brett and started the race from there. Is that how you saw the leg or not?
Not really. I think that it was worth doing all the stuff leading up to it, and it was certainly a close race, and the potential was for it to come down to the last bit, but that was only because everyone had done so well up to there. It is actually quite fun when you end up finishing a race on the last coastal portion, but still worthwhile doing the whole leg. I like the Pacific.
He also made the comment, and a few others did, about AIS and the fact that they felt that they couldn't really get away from it and couldn't really get away to do a move. How do you feel about it?
It is what it is, really. I just am happy to accept that we've got it now, and we can run with it. We actually saw Brunel tack, and we inferred from that SCA had tacked. So we were in the position, we were in the middle of the fleet, and we could see both sides. So, look, from my perspective, I'd be happy to find out where people were once a day, but I'm pretty happy to just go and do my own thing. From a navigator's perspective, the more you can do your own thing, the better, and I think we actually often sail better when we're just worrying about our own game plan. But I accept that it's there. It's a very necessary safety tool now. My only concern is that people rely on it too much, and I'll often go on deck and say, have you looked under the masthead zero lately? And they'll go, oh no, there's nothing on AIS. And I'll say, well, go and have a look, and they'll have a look and go, that fishing boat's not on AIS. No, lots of fishing boats aren't. So you have to be careful that you don't rely on it for everything, because lots of people don't use it.
But with this race being the first one they've used a one design for, do you think the passing lanes are really there now, particularly when you've got something like AIS, which is being effectively used like a harbour racing tool?
You can't cover everyone, and so if someone chooses to do something different, then you won't be able to respond. It's been a pretty one-way racetrack in many cases, where there's been a potential for there to be a split. We've still had the split, and people have gone off AIS. I think the big problem in the second and the third legs were that the weather routing and the models are not that great in that part of the world, and so you went off AIS at your peril because you couldn't cover the fleet effectively and feel strong about a routing decision. Whereas particularly when we're in the excuse me, when we get back into the Atlantic and so on, the models are that much better that you have confidence in going off on your own.
We've got the next leg starting up, going into the Southern Ocean. Do you see AIS being a sort of similar role that it's played in the previous four legs, or is it going to be a lot more open and more options?
Right now, there's a nice tropical storm that got named today that's heading down and is going to be setting up to the east of New Zealand. So I think we're going to be concentrating on keeping the boats together for the first few days. It looks like we can get over the top of it, but the sea state will be the problem, because you'll be going downwind in an upwind sea state because the low will be to the east of you. So I'm less concerned about the AIS and more concerned about keeping the boat in one piece for the first few days. But I have no doubt that it will play a role I talk about the low because in a more traditional situation you can have a big choice of 20 degrees of heading, and you get around East Cape and someone might dive south and someone might go east. What this low does is going to force us all over the top at the moment, so that will keep us together.
What sort of wind strength are you seeing currently in that cyclone?
There's the real potential to have 50 knots of wind or more. It's not ideal, but you can choose to be further away from it. So we're back into the seamanship discussion.
So what are you seeing in your models? Because I mean, one I'm looking at shows it coming quite close to the coast of New Zealand with sort of no escape route, and another one shows it being a bit further offshore where the boats could easily stay close to the New Zealand coast and maybe avoid the worst of it.
Yeah, well, we're about to run the ensemble stuff where we get 50 goes at seeing what it does, and then we'll put a percentage on it. But it is still only Tuesday. We're not racing till Sunday, so there's plenty of time for it to move a little bit. I guess the main thing is that it doesn't look like at the moment that we're going to end up south of it, which would be the worst case scenario for everything.
So from what I saw, I mean, it looked like it was going to lead the fleet away from New Zealand. Is that what you were saying, that you're going to basically follow it?
Yeah, it is what it looks like. But the models are getting better, but they're notoriously bad. If they're one thing they're bad at predicting accurately, it's a fast-moving tropical system.
So what sort of preparation do you do, as a navigator when you've, got to sit confronted with a situation like that, and then you've also got Southern Ocean, you've got ice and all that sort of carry on, which the Volvo's famous for?
Well, a lot of the having done it a few times now, I've got lots of history to fall back on, which is all written documents that I carry with me, and there's a fair chance that this leg could be decided on the South American coast. So, for instance, I need to be the temptation is to focus on there's a huge low and you've got to get away from that at the beginning, but I'm also thinking about the Straits of Le Maire. Once you get east of Cape Horn, do you go through there? Do you go east of the Falklands? Do you go west of the Falklands? How good are the new meteorological models? We've had a major step up in the models this time round in the resolution. So whereas historically they've been very bad, we've been doing a little study on the meteorological models and whether they're going to do a better job on the South American coast. The Andes, huge mountains, have a big impact on that part of it. So I'm also thinking about the latter part of the race where it could easily be decided and sea land breeze transitions and the current. There's two big currents, the Brazil current in particular, that we have to be careful about. So I'm thinking about a whole lot of things that are outside of the bounds of the models at the moment, but I've got climatological information and then I've got history to go back on. So I spend quite a bit of time making sure I've got all that stuff ready to use on board.
Some of the comments have been that, with the routing, it's actually probably showing you where not to go rather than where you should be going. Do you sort of have a degree of scepticism about it, or what?
You should always have a healthy degree of scepticism, but it depends how you use them. I mean, as I have written in my book, the concept of following the blue line it just draws a line because that it happens to be the optimal route, but there could be another line 300 miles away that's 2 minutes slower. So it's about understanding what the routing is telling you and running it faster, slower. Rotate the winds, increase the winds, decrease the winds, add more percentage to the current. So the whole thing is just a guide, and I think in general it's much better than it ever has been. So I still find it very helpful.
When you realise that with these boats being short crewed, I mean the backup for the Navigator has got to be looked at pretty hard. Is that what? I mean, how do you guys run it in terms of backup, or how do you run it on other races in terms of backup with, more numbers on the boat?
My view on it is that the skipper is ultimately responsible, of course, as is standard, but in the end they have to devolve a lot of that responsibility to the navigator. And so the relationship between the skipper and the navigator is critical. And on other boats, most of the time it does. It's on me, really. And one thing I do find occasionally is that because you get a reputation for being thorough, that can lead to other people being less thorough. And so I'm forever going at the watch captains and the skipper. You have to read this, you have to check this as well, because you need to have those multiple checks and balances to try and make sure you don't have problems occurring. But then the navigator does end up wearing the responsibility just because there's not enough people to go around. But how I like to run it is I don't think I've sat a watch for 20 years, but so I'm awake when I need to be awake, when there's danger or there's a decision to be made, and I get my sleep when there is a chance to have it. But when I go to sleep here, the person that, Charlie in this instance, here are the things coming up, here is the minimum depth you expect. I'm happy if you're within this wind range. If the wind shifts outside of this, then you need to wake me. And so there's a whole set of parameters within which I'm happy to be not woken, and outside of that, wake me. And so the default setting, if there's any doubt, is wake the navigator.
What about for the average Joe sailor? What do you think the situation is in terms of, best practice should be?
For me, I would recommend to anyone who was serious about their sailing and offshore sailing that there's a huge amount of value in, from my perspective in Australia, the Yachting Australia courses, right up to Yachtmaster, and in the UK, the Royal Yachting Association. And New Zealand has I'm not sure exactly what the current situation is, but those qualifications and the training that you have to do to get there sets you in good stead. So I would thoroughly recommend that people that are wanting to do offshore sailing make sure that they get some of those bits of paper as well, from my perspective.
Okay, well thank you very much and all the best for the next leg.
No worries.